Okay, so what if the secret to getting rich wasn't about doing more, but doing less? We're about to dive into the mind of Charlie Munger, the investing powerhouse who was convinced that the real money isn't made in the buying and selling, but in the waiting. I mean, this one idea just flips the entire logic of Wall Street on its head, right? In a world that is constantly screaming at you to trade faster and get instant results, Munger's core belief was in the quiet, profound power of doing absolutely nothing. It sounds so simple, but trust me, in practice, it's one of the hardest things an investor can possibly do.
We've all heard of Warren Buffett, of course, the Oracle of Omaha. But working behind the curtain, away from the spotlight, was his secret weapon, Charlie Munger. And he wasn't just a business partner. He was Buffett's intellectual sparring partner, the guy whose main job was to poke holes in every single idea. So what was his real genius then? Was he just, exceptionally good at picking stocks? Not even close. His real talent was a totally different way of thinking, a mental framework that let him see the world and investment opportunities with a kind of clarity that most people just completely miss. To really get a handle on his genius, we've got to start with his one-of-a-kind role at Berkshire Hathaway. He wasn't just a partner. They called him the abominable no-man. Just think about that dynamic for a second. You have Warren Buffett, arguably the greatest investor in history, who flat out said Munger was smarter and wiser than him. Why? Because Charlie could spot the fatal flaw in any deal in 60 seconds flat. His job wasn't to cheerlead. It was to find the problems, to say no, and to save them from their own blind spots.
So how did he do it? How was he this ultimate devil's advocate? Well, it was all powered by the absolute core of his philosophy, something he called the latticework of mental models. And it's how he approached everything, not just investing, but life itself. Munger's big idea was that you just can't understand a complex problem if you're only looking at it through one narrow lens, like finance or economics. It's like trying to build a house with only a hammer. It's just not going to work. You need a much bigger toolkit. And this was his toolkit. He would pull the big, game-changing ideas from all these different fields. Why? Because, let's be real, the world isn't neatly divided up into academic subjects. It's one big, complex, messy system. And to see it clearly, your thinking has to be just as interconnected. Okay, so that's the big theory. But how did this mental lattice work actually translate into action? Let's break down the essential tools Munger used to make better decisions every single day. First up, and this one is so important, is what he called the circle of competence. The whole point isn't to be a genius at everything. It's about knowing exactly what you understand, and, this is the crucial part, knowing what you don't understand. You see, Munger believed that our biggest mistakes, both in our portfolios and in our lives, happen when we drift outside of that circle. By staying disciplined and only playing in the areas where you have genuine, deep expertise, you slash your risk and give yourself a massive sustainable advantage. All right, so you're operating inside your circle. What's next? Well, now you have to protect yourself, because let's face it, you're going to be wrong sometimes. We all are. This principle is all about building a cushion for that inevitable moment. That's exactly what this is, a life jacket for your investments. A margin of safety doesn't just protect you from a crazy market, it protects you from yourself, from your own errors. It is the fundamental difference between making a smart, calculated investment and just rolling the dice. And that leads us to his most famous and maybe most difficult principle, the incredible power of patience. Munger knew that real wealth isn't built by frantic activity. It's built by having the discipline to let time and the magic of compounding do all the heavy lifting for you. He had this great analogy for it. He said compounding is like a snowball rolling down a very, very long hill. It starts out small, but over time it just gathers more and more snow, more and more momentum, until it becomes this unstoppable force. That simple math is the engine behind pretty much every great fortune ever made. And hey, this isn't just some textbook theory. Just think about the early investors in a company like Amazon, the ones who had the stomach to just hold on through all the market crashes and scary headlines. They didn't time every swing. They just found a great business and had the iron will to wait. But, and here's the catch, having all the right tools is totally useless if your own mind is working against you. Munger was convinced that the biggest obstacle to success wasn't the market, it was the flawed wiring inside our own heads. You have to learn how to outsmart yourself. He was completely obsessed with this question.
He figured out that the human brain, for all its brilliance, is basically a machine that's full of glitches and mental shortcuts. And these biases cause even the smartest people to make just awful, irrational decisions, especially when there's money on the line.
So he literally cataloged dozens of these mental mistakes. Everything from our irrational fear of losing money to our tendency to just follow the herd off a cliff. For Munger, understanding these psychological traps wasn't a hobby. It was just as important as reading a company's balance sheet. Because if you don't know they exist, you are destined to become their victim.
So, when you put all these pieces together, what's the ultimate lesson we can take away from Charlie Munger's incredible life of learning and independent thought? It really comes down to this: a call for radical, unapologetic independence. It's about doing the hard work to figure out how the world really works, and then having the courage to actually act on that knowledge, even if it makes you unpopular, even if it makes you look foolish in the short term.
Preparation, discipline, patience, decisiveness, these aren't just buzzwords. They are the bedrock principles he actually lived by. This isn't some secret formula for getting rich quick. It's a practical roadmap for thinking more clearly, making better decisions, and, at the end of the day, living a better life. You know, maybe Munger's greatest lesson is that this isn't about being born a genius. It's about a commitment to being a lifelong learner. He showed us that anybody can start building a more powerful mental toolkit, one brick at a time. So the only question his philosophy really leaves us with is, what's the first brick you're going to lay?